Wake up! It's the Sleep Unplugged podcast, episode 137, Insomnia and Vagal Nerve Stimulators. Are you getting the vibe? Welcome, everyone, to the Sleep Unplugged podcast. My name is Chris Winter. I'm a neurologist, sleep specialist, and your host for this episode of the podcast. If you're new to the Sleep Unplugged family, welcome. If you are a veteran of the podcast, welcome back. We are glad you're here. It's been a busy week around here. Traveled back to Charlottesville, Virginia last week to do some filming. Really great to get back to Virginia again. If you listened to last week's podcast, like, weren't you just in Virginia? Yes. Went to Williamsburg and Richmond, did some lecturing, came back to Florida. Literally the next day, got on a plane and went back to Charlottesville. Always great to be there and see familiar faces. This is an episode of the podcast I'm really excited to do. I've had it literally on the list of topics for quite some time, so it's fun to kind of get to this, and we'll dive into it in just a second. If you want to get in touch with the podcast, you can through social media. I'm at Dr. Chris Winter Instagram, Dr. Chris Winter Twitter, Blue Skies, Threads. We have a YouTube page where we post video content of all of our episodes. We also have a Spotify playlist. We're on volume 3 of the Sleep Unplugged Spotify playlist, where we post music that we talk about in every episode. So if you're on Spotify, you can listen to this podcast. Maybe you're listening to the podcast now on Spotify. You can also search Sleep Unplugged playlist, and there's volume 1, 2, 3 of all the songs we talk about. And today will be no exception. We will talk about songs. No sponsor for the podcast on this episode. So I'm going to go to some comments, corrections, criticisms. And since we skipped last week's viewer comments, I'm going to read two. One's from Lieutenant Scooby Doo. I can only assume that's a call sign for somebody in the military. This doctor's teachings have helped me more than any other program or sleep solutions I've tried in the past. I hope and pray that everyone who struggles with sleep will find their way to this page. I encourage anyone who sees this and knows of someone who struggles with sleep to send them these links because they are truly transformational. I cannot say thank you enough, Dr. Chris, and I hope that you know just how important your work is and how much you've helped people like me. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. Lieutenant Scooby Doo is talking about our Sleep Unplugged YouTube page. So I appreciate that, and I'm really happy that this is helping you. It means a lot to me that you reached out. The next one is from AN. Those are his initials. Hope this email finds you well. I'm writing to express my deepest gratitude for your book, The Sleep Solution. For the past 3 years, I struggled with severe sleep issues and had been relying on sleeping pills. Despite my efforts, restful sleep seemed impossible until I read your book. Your insights, guidance, and explanations not only changed my perspective on sleep, but also gave me the confidence to leave the pills behind. Now I'm sleeping peacefully, and it feels like I've been given a new life. I cannot thank you enough for your impact you have had on my well being. Well, I appreciate both of those. And I intentionally chose those communications because, as you know, this is the first Monday of February. So it is Insomnia Monday. We always talk about a topic related to insomnia, first episode of every month. And this is no different. Before we dive into the podcast, the musical reference to the show, Are You Getting the Vibe, is from the song Thank You World by World Party. This was off of their second album, 1990s Goodbye Jumbo, thought by many critics, including Q Magazine, to be the best album released in 1990. Of course, World Party is mainly Carl Wallinger, who passed away in March of last year. A big loss in music. This guy was one of the most talented songwriters and multi-instrument. Think Prince when you think of this guy could play every instrument. In fact, before he joined World Party, he recorded 2 albums with the Waterboys. And if you want a good song from the Waterboys, I'll give you two: Fisherman's Blues and Hole of the Moon, which Carl worked on Hole of the Moon, not Fisherman's Blues. Um, anyway, he left the Waterboys and formed World Party. Their first album, Private Revolution, was outstanding. Their second, Goodbye Jumbo, was really good. And this is a fantastic song off of it. And it's got one of the greatest outros of any song I've ever heard. So the song plays, and then it kind of abruptly stops. The music changes. And I'm going to read to you this outro from the song, which I think is incredible. And you can listen to it again on the Spotify music playlist. Everything She is everything I need. She is living guaranteed. She's what I mean when I say everything's all right. She's got diamonds, she's got pearls, she's got wisdom, and this girl is all you need to know that everything's all right. And I need to know that everything's all right. I think we all need to know that everything's all right, both in terms of our sleep and just kind of what's going on in the world today. So hopefully this is a helpful episode. And really quick shout out. If you go way back, I believe it was the bonus episode around episode 10. I talk about shooting sleeping around, where I slept on the side of a mountain, slept with the fire department, and went on tour with Shaky Graves. The opening act for Shaky Graves on that tour, when I was with him, was a West Virginia musician named Sierra Farrell. And the Grammys are happening tonight, and she absolutely swept the Americana category, won 4 Grammys tonight for her album American Dreaming. And she's just absolutely outstanding. And just want to give a shout out to Sierra. And when I was working on that episode and hanging out with Shaky Graves, I spent some time with her. And she was really interested in sleep and had really interesting ideas about her own sleep and her dreams. And you could see why this person's just a creative force. And just want to give a big shout out to Sierra Farrell. So let's get into this episode. So this is an episode about insomnia, and that's important because with insomnia comes insomnia solutions. And throughout my career, various companies have reached out to me and said, "Hey, we want to set up a time and talk to you about this amazing device that we have that is going to help your patients with insomnia, cure their patients' insomnia, whatever the claim is." And I was always sort of resistant to it. And so as I thought about putting this episode together, I really thought about, what problems, biases, beliefs am I bringing to this podcast, and how can I make sure that they don't color the way I look at this? Because what we're talking about are transcutaneous vagal nerve stimulators. Okay, what does that mean? Transcutaneous means this is not implanted. There is no surgery. It's a device that you put somewhere on your wrist, around your neck, on your ear or whatever, and it is creating some sort of vibration that is supposed to be stimulating your vagus nerve. Great. What is your vagus nerve? Well, your vagus nerve is one of your cranial nerves, which means it originates from your brain, not from your spine. Comes right off the medulla. So that part of your brain that's sort of transitioning from brain to spinal cord, it's coming out that bottom part of the brain, exits through your skull and goes down your neck into your thorax and your abdomen and controls a lot of parasympathetic activity. We've talked about that before. And that makes sense when we're talking about insomnia, which often has to do with cortisol and sympathetic arousal and anxiety and fear and all of these things that combine to make it difficult for people to initiate or maintain sleep. So it makes sense that if we can not the fight or flight, if we're not initiating fight or flight, but we're rest and digest, which is what we often think about with the parasympathetic nerve, that we are going to push people towards a state where they're more likely to be able to initiate sleep confidently, quickly, all the things, all the expectations that people have when it comes to their sleep. So, that being said, there have been several devices that have been created over the years that are being sold and marketed as things that allow you to relax, engage that parasympathetic activity easier, and sleep better. And to name a few of them, Pulsetto, Neurosim, Truvaga. Now it's Truvaga, not Truvada, which is a HIV prevention medication that you've probably seen advertised on TV. um, Apollo and Sensate. And we'll talk about Apollo and Sensate. I chose them somewhat at random. I get a lot of, I was getting a lot of communication for a period of time from Apollo. Hey, our rep would really like to meet with you, our coordinator person. I don't even know, there's some person high up in this company wants to talk to you about this. Who knows? And so I have no personal relationship with any of these companies. And as I was talking about kind of identifying a bias from them, I think I probably carry a little bit of a negative bias with anything that aligns with treatments for insomnia. But it is interesting because I was talking about this episode with a colleague, and they said something on the order of, "Well, didn't you do some stuff for that sleep robot, Somnox?" I've talked about it. Look it up, Somnox sleep robot. It is like a little baby shape. It's kind of like more like a bean shape. And when you hold it, you can feel it breathe in and breathe out. You match your breathing with that, and it makes you sleep better, makes you relax and maybe initiate sleep a little bit easier. I've also talked about Dodow, DOW, little thing that shines a blue light on the ceiling. As it gets bigger, you breathe in. As it gets smaller, you breathe out, and you kind of match your breathe. Same thing. Moonbird, we've talked about with products that help you sleep. And the conversation was, you seem pretty positive about those. Why are you negative about the transcutaneous vagal stimulators? And what I said was, to something that I don't think that I'm negative about them. I just feel like the way that they're marketed sort of gets my hunches up or doesn't. Hey, you should hold this little moonbird in your hand and let it, kind of grow and shrink, match your breathing to it. It'll help you kind of relax and calm down. I mean, I just saw something on social media. This guy, I mean, again, I love it all, but he was serious. He was like, I spent years trying to get my anxiety under control. I went to my doctor, no medications work. And my doctor said, have you tried breathing through a straw? Which is sort of a thing. It's kind of like the brown paper bag when you're having an anxiety attack, you breathe into it and kind of helps you, whatever. And so this guy designed the perfect straw of diameter and length to make, your anxiety. You would just, hey, listen, you want to buy a gold-plated straw for however many dollars? That's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But, he was just kind of marketing as something that kind of allows you to relax and calm down and maybe have less anxiety. So, sure, you want to try the straw instead of a pill? I don't have any problem with that. I think when something starts getting marketed as an insomnia solution, that's where I start to get kind of testy, a little salty. So we'll talk about these devices, kind of what they do, and some of the research, which is readily available. You can look up the research on these studies. You can go on these devices. You can go to their websites and find the place that says research. So when there is a claim made, what is behind that claim? It's really important to do that. And again, just because something does or doesn't have research behind it doesn't mean it does or doesn't work. It just limits what we can say. You know what I'm saying? Like, I can dunk a basketball, and you're thinking, the guy's kind of short and doesn't look that athletic, and he's kind of old. I bet he can't. So I'm going to assume he can't until I see evidence to you know what I'm saying? Like, so talk, bottom line, talk is cheap. So the first one I looked at was Apollo because that seemed to be the company that was most aggressively reaching out to me at some point. I haven't heard from them in a long time. I think they gave up on me. So I went to the Apollo page to kind of research this podcast, and I'm looking specifically at sleep. I'm not really caring about anxiety and relaxation and all that stuff, which is, that's not really for me to talk about. That's not my wheelhouse here. I'm a neurologist and sleep specialist. I'll leave that up to somebody else. So what I found with Apollo was up to 19% more deep sleep. And what I liked was it's all the little infographics, and it's really big where it says 90% deep sleep. And then right on top in the 8-point font, it says up to. And we've talked in the past about the phrase up to. I love that. Why stop at 19? Why not 300%, up to 300%? Doesn't mean we get to 300%, but we could be somewhere, anyway, up to 19% more deep sleep, up to 30 minutes more sleep, up to 14% more REM sleep. And there were some other things talking about the improvements with their sleep. And okay, great. So as I kept reading, I'm trying to figure out, okay, what exactly are these claims being based on? And what they said was they have completed 8 clinical trials. And so the research is there. And again, I invite you to not take my word for anything. Look it up yourself in terms of, okay, clinical trials. And the things we need to look at when we're looking at a clinical trial is who's funding it. And obviously, that's important. Number two, how big is the clinical trial? Number three, what is the clinical trial showing and how is it measuring that? So what is the endpoint here? And so when you're looking, if you take the clinical trials that deal with sleep specifically as some kind of endpoint, we get much smaller in terms of the available data. And what I found on their own webpage, and again, you can look yourself, the first one was this was the title of the study, the effect of vibroacoustic stimulation on athletes recovering from exercise. Oh, something there. Excuse me. Um, so there's a university, this was a University of Pittsburgh club and varsity athletes. There were 22 of them participate in the study. They pedaled on a stationary bike and then they appeared of recovery. And then the recovery either used the vibrational device or it didn't. And so what's being measured here? What was being measured was subjective and physiological skin conductive response and cardiac measures were used to determine the extent of recovery with frontal EEG measures indexing brain reactivity. So you're probably already thinking that doesn't sound like me. I don't see insomnia anywhere in there. I also don't necessarily identify with a collegiate athlete at the University of Pittsburgh. And I believe it's the University of Pittsburgh because the guy who kind of founded this technology, and I feel like I had a conversation with him a long, long time ago. I think it was at Pitt. So the other one that they really kind of leaned into with sleep was, and again, I'll read the title, Wearable in Systemic Sclerosis. So this was in a rheumatological journal. A pilot study of the Apollo wearable demonstrates improvement in fatigue, Raynaud phenomenon, and quality of life in patients with systemic sclerosis. Okay, again, are you somebody struggling with systemic sclerosis? If you are, number one, sorry to hear that. Number two, maybe this study is for you. How many patients were in the study? 25. And again, what they showed was sort of a range of improvements. And what I'll do is just for simplicity's sake, let's stick with improvements in sleep amount. Because when you talk to patients who are struggling with insomnia, that is what they want. And in this study, the control group was averaging about 420 minutes of sleep. The experimental group, the group wearing the Apollo wearable, 444.7 minutes of sleep. So that's an improvement of about 5.8%. Let's call it 6%. So you're getting essentially 25 more minutes of sleep on the device than off the device. So let's explore that a little bit. I think 25 minutes of extra sleep every night for the rest of the year, since we're in February now, is pretty big, right? Let's call it 30 minutes of extra sleep. So every 2 nights, you're grabbing an extra hour. Every 16 days, every two weeks, you're essentially getting an extra night of sleep in there. That's really big. We like more sleep to some extent. Let's not get into it. More sleep's not always better. In fact, I'm getting ready to I'll see patients tomorrow on Monday. Somebody will be seeking way too much sleep than they can actually get, and they're frustrated with it. So again, it's not about getting more sleep, but for some people, maybe it is. So I don't want to diminish 30 minutes of extra sleep, but we have to kind of figure out how are we getting there? What does 30 minutes mean? What does 5.8% more sleep mean? And the first thing that I want to do is one of the criticisms of this these therapies are placebo effect. And I would lump in there as well unclear mechanism of action. How is this working? I see a lot of true and questionably related in medicine. Wait a minute, Chris. You said vagal nerve stimulators, would theoretically reduce sympathetic, increase parasympathetic tone, and that would lead to more rest and digest, right? Correct. But the application of this vibrating device as it pertains to that nerve isn't necessarily one to one there. We don't really know what these things are doing, so trying to explain them through studies is tough. The placebo effect is really interesting, and there are several studies looking at this. You can find them all over the place. This goes back a long time. And what I was really interested primarily in was the placebo effect as it related to insomnia and sleep metrics. And so when you actually really start, there's a bunch of studies. One that kind of stuck out to me: effective placebo conditions on polysomnographic parameters in primary insomnia, a meta-analysis. Let's dissect. A lot of big words there. Effective placebo conditions. What is the placebo doing in the study in terms of a polysomnographic? That is a fancy word for an in-lab sleep study. Wires taped to your head, taped to your face, taped to your legs, taped to your arms, around your chest, everywhere you can think about. So, in-lab sleep study in primary insomnia. Insomnia that is insomnia, it's not coming from uh, secondary insomnia, like can't sleep because your husband's snoring, can't sleep because you have chronic pain. And by the way, when I listen to a great podcast, there is a fantastic podcast episode of the New York Times Daily on chronic pain, which as a sleep doctor we see a lot of. So if you're somebody who's struggling with chronic pain, I certainly invite you to listen to that. And I'm sure you're here because of the insomnia that often goes along with it. So what these studies looked at is what is the effect of the placebo arm in various sleep studies. And when I think about this, I think about the restless leg treatments. We've talked about restless leg before on the podcast. And when you look up the studies of the dopamine agonists on restless leg, the placebo effect was enormous. So much so that a lot of people lost sight of the study and said, well, these drugs don't work because look how many people improve taking placebo drugs for restless leg syndrome. Yes, massive improvement, but the improvement on the experimental drug was statistically much higher than that. So those experimental drugs worked, but the placebos seem to do pretty well as well too. So what those studies suggest is sitting down with somebody, talking to them about their sleep study, giving them, recognizing it, validating it, and giving them something that's going to help often does. And that placebo effect is really important because we need to subtract that out from the results of any study. So let's think about the placebo effect. And generally speaking, let's take out the restless leg placebo effect because it was huge. But generally speaking, when you're looking at insomnia, and yes, you could argue that a lot of people maybe with restless leg, or I'm sorry, with insomnia are actually dealing with restless leg and they don't know it. That aside, talking about primary insomnia, what does the placebo effect look like? It's generally somewhere around zero point 0.2 to zero point 0.5. So what that means is no matter what you're giving, vagal nerve stimulator, a pill. I was actually looking up studies on energy crystals, soap underneath your bed, a special insomnia headband, insomnia music, whatever it is, whatever, you're generally going to get about a zero point 0.2 to zero point 0.5 effect on your variable. So let's go back to the vagal nerve stimulator. What was the effect there on sleep time specifically? It was about 0.58. Let's call it zero point 0.6. So that's important, right? That no matter what we do for patients, no matter what you're doing for your insomnia, let's think about the people who wrote in Lieutenant Scooby Doo and AN. I'm really happy that the YouTube video or my book helped them. I think these things help people. That's why I do them, right? but there's probably a bit of a placebo effect. In other words, if you said, Chris, have you ever helped somebody with insomnia and they're better? They're over it. They're thanking you. You've given them their life back, but they come back to see you 6 months, 2 years later, struggling again. Yes, absolutely yes. And there's often a bit of disappointment, heightened fear that, oh my God, that thing was working. The thing you told me was working, Chris. That CBTI was working. Your book was working. Your podcast was working. Whatever. The Moonbird was working. The Apollo was working. And now it's not working. So that placebo effect can be quite high. So when I see somebody has got 30 more minutes of sleep in this situation versus the other, my first thought is, well, how many of those 30 minutes could I have achieved with a device that I constructed from an old cell phone? You know, the little part that vibrates when you want to put it on silent alarm. That I just say, here's my treatment for insomnia. I'm Dr. Winter. I've been doing this for 30 years. I've written 2 books. I work with sports teams. I've created this insomnia solution for you. You tape it to the middle of your forehead and it'll vibrate a few times as you're getting ready to go to sleep, and it's going to cure your insomnia. In fact, they've got a study that shows that, people are sleeping 30 minutes, up to 30 minutes more per night, and much more deep sleep. And the suggestion of that matters. Bill Fox, I've talked to him about him before in my podcast. My primary care doctor said, Chris, I think I'm saying the same things you do to my patients about sleep and insomnia. And I was like, why are you having more success? Because I'm a sleep specialist, because I work with World Series winning teams. Does it make me any better? No, but there's probably a heightened belief and placebo effect. So that might be happening to you right now, listeners. So you can turn off and go listen to that New York Times podcast like I was telling you about. Like, there is belief in medicine and we manipulate it, right? Now that's not all that's happening. Yeah, sure, you believe in the antibiotic, but the antibiotic works. You believe in a vaccine, but the vaccine works, right? So belief is important. And we're seeing right now when there is a loud group of individuals who stop believing in medicine and start misconstruing data in a way that fits a particular narrative that we will not get into on this podcast. So, placebo effect is big. Let's take away placebo effect. Chris, you're wrong about placebo effect. Actually, these devices don't have placebo effect. You're actually getting 30 more minutes of sleep guaranteed or your money back. And speaking of money, I meant to throw out there the cost of these devices. I looked them up and they're as accurate as what I saw on the internet. Pulsetto, $269. Neurosim, $700. It look, it was in pounds, so it's not a, doesn't look like it's an American company. Truvaga, 299 or 499 depending on which model you get. I love that choice, don't you? Like, you can't sleep. Are you really going to buy the 299? You know what I mean? Like, I can imagine people who bought the 299 model and they're like vibrating some part of their body and they're like, God damn, this doesn't work. This doesn't work. Should have bought the $499. I wonder if there's a program where you can turn in the 299 and upgrade to the 499. I always like those kinds of programs. If you bring it back within this, you can apply it to a credit for getting the better one. The Apollo 349 and the Sensate is 314. So it looks like right now the cheapest one is the Pulsetto. Anyway, um, so let's take away the placebo effect, and let's say, Chris, there is no placebo effect. It's real. You get an additional 30 more minutes. I think it's important to ask the question, how meaningful is that to you? And this is where I start to sometimes differ with the way things are advertised. If people are reaching out saying, Chris, I think we can really enhance a population of your patients and take them from good sleep to really good sleep. You got an athlete that's kind of right there and wants to, it's like the sleep hacking thing. Man, I feel like lightning is going to strike me for saying that term, but to me, that's what sleep hacking is. It's not some big change. It's, I'm going to make all these little things better. We've talked about British cycling. Let's make everything we do at British cycling 1% better. And if we do this 100 times, we'll be 100% better. And if you listen to that podcast, I can't remember when I was talking about it. They won all the medals because they really made everything. If you're like, look, I want to make my sleep a little bit better. I want to make my sheets a little bit comfortable. I want my room a little bit darker. I want my nutrition a little bit better. My stress reduction, great. So that's the conversation I have with people. Somebody's like, look, I keep waking up at 5:30. It's just pretty, I feel fine, but I wake up at 5:30, but God, I'd really like to sleep till 6. We have the conversation of, well, when you wake up at 5:30, you're getting 7.5 hours of sleep. And we tie 7 hours, you know, average wise, best to health. So that's pretty good. And you're 7.5, and but you're seeking 8. Why? And we have a little conversation. Maybe eight's not better. But if somebody's like, look, if this device for about $300 get me another 30 minutes of uninterrupted sleep, I'd like to give it a try. I think that's a perfect patient for this device, right? That's okay. That's fine. That's not the takes me 7 hours to fall asleep every night. I'm lucky if I get 1 hour of sleep. I'm a mess. I've tried 200 different sleeping pills. None of them work. Da, da, da. Yeah, I've tried CBT. Didn't work. Tried this. Didn't work. Didn't work. Didn't work. Didn't work. I mean, I can't in good conscience say, well, here's what you need. Something vibrating you. Maybe there's nothing wrong with being vibrated, depending on where we're talking, I guess. But so what I mean? So I feel like I'm setting you up to be mad that you spent $300 and you're like, this didn't work. Back to the work word. It didn't work. Because I can tell you right now, if you think you're getting 2 hours of sleep a night, and this thing it over delivers. And now instead of 2 hours of sleep, you're getting 2 hours and 40 minutes of sleep. Or it used to take you 3 hours to fall asleep, and now it's taking you 2 hours and 20 minutes to fall asleep. You are going to be mad at me for recommending this thing. So when we think about transcutaneous vagal nerve stimulators for sleep enhancement, I think we have to be very careful when we start drifting over until vagal nerve stimulators for insomnia. I've got something that will probably help correct when you hit the golf ball, your slice a little bit. It's a little tool that's been shown to reduce slice by about 30% and maybe help you stay on that fairway a little bit better. If you're somebody who can't even hit the ball, I don't think that device that I'm making up right now is right for you. We've got a lot to do before we get to the place where we might or might not need the device that corrects the slice a little bit. Because in order to slice the ball, you have to hit it. And for a lot of insomnia patients, brother, they're not even hitting the ball, they're not even close. We have so much to do. And as attractive as it would be to put this cool looking Tron device around your neck, shell out a few $100, and be vibrated into a blissful night of perfect sleep. Listen, I wish that thing existed. I do. I don't think that's going to be the solution for you. But you're an adult and you can read the literature, you can talk to people, and you can figure that out. So I think that these things have a place. You're somebody who's like, Chris, I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good. I'd like to be maybe even a little bit better. And what I always ask patients before they pay money for anything related to sleep is, how are you going to feel if it doesn't work? If the answer is, oh, it's okay. I mean, I got a lot of money, $300 to kind of try something out and see what it's like and how it makes me feel. I'm good with spending that money. Then God bless you. Go ahead, spend the money, see what happens. So, placebo effect, we've talked about. Is it a meaningful amount of sleep for what you're looking for? Talked about. Two things I want to throw out there that I think are irrelevant: skin irritation, and we don't know what the long term effects of it are. Listen, I don't know what the long term effects of staring into a web camera are, but I do it a lot. So if we're 5 years away from, man, if you've been staring into a web camera for 8 hours a day, Monday through Friday, you're in big trouble. Then Dr. Winter is in super big trouble. I've never talked to anybody who's really found skin irritation to be a big deal. I mean, I guess if you're frustrated that your device is not working and you were vibrating the hell out of your ear or your neck or wherever you got this thing, but this is not something that I hear a lot about. And I've got athletes that use these things to kind of help with, modulating stress, relaxing quickly and whatnot. The biggest problem I have with the research is a lot of times these are not the most robustly designed studies. We've talked about 25 people, not a big number to really make a lot of conclusions about. But a lot of these studies are just self-reported. Hey, this is one of the studies. Hey, got an Aura ring and you've bought our new device? Well, if you have an Aura ring and you've bought our $300 vagal nerve stimulator, participate in our study where you tell us how you've been sleeping. So it's all reported information. And you've got to be careful with those types of things. Who's reporting? Do you know what I mean? Like who's taking the time to kind of do these things? And when you spend 300 some odd dollars on a device, I guess is deep down you kind of want it to work. So the study design, I want you to pay attention to when it says research studies show, are they peer reviewed? Is this a journal that seems to be a real journal? And what was the study design like? And I think that's really important. So that subjective reporting is kind of tough. Um, and long-term data, not a big thing that we really have with these devices. They're all kind of new to the scene. So do I think you're in danger outside of financial danger of ordering and using one of these things? No. Do I think that they're going to, there's some sort of long-term problem with them? I really highly doubt it. I think they're probably perfectly inert. So that's it. Vagal nerve stimulators done and dusted. If you have experience with one, disagree, or you found research that really supports these things as a great treatment for insomnia, let me know. We'll put you right on the next episode of the podcast. Contact me, Dr. Chris Winter Twitter, Dr. Chris Winter Instagram. Hey, we've got March 16th. The Sleep Unplugged 2025 pillow fight is coming up. We're going to do a whole March Madness episode where different pillows from different companies are going to square off in a bracket. So we've already got one half of the 16 team field full. So really excited. We already have Nest on board, Casper, Dozy Boy, Atlux, Marlowe, Twilla, Bedgear, Pillow Cube, and even more on the way. If you've got a favorite pillow and you're like, Chris, don't sleep on this particular pillow or do sleep on this particular pillow, let me know how it changed the way you sleep. I'll contact the company, see if they'll send us one, and keep an eye out for that. We'll have the bracket revealed. If you want to guess the winner and play the bracket challenge, you can do that as well too. We're going to have a lot of fun with this. So that's it for the podcast. Everybody sleep well.